Hey, this is Gary with Today for Tomorrow, and I'm here in Winding Waters Natural Area in Palm Beach County, Florida. And joining me today is Antonio Rodriguez. Antonio is an environmental biologist who specializes in these invasive species. Antonio, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks. I'm glad to be doing this.
All right, so invasive species can be a real problem. Sometimes we don't really understand why, and we might not even be able to recognize an invasive plant when we're literally stepping on it. So Antonio is going to take us around today, tell us about A, why invasives are a problem, B, how they get here, and C, what we can do about it. And just in the process, he's going to point them out to us because there's a lot to learn. And if we can learn about them, then we can start to address the problem. Antonio, let's go check out some of these invasives.
All right, let's do it. Okay. All right. So invasive species, right? So we're trying to find out why are they a problem, okay? If you look behind me, you see, I don't know, trees and plants in nature. It looks beautiful, right? I don't see any problems. I don't see that. I see the invasives. So I'm going to point some of those out to you so you can kind of see which ones are the problems. So right next to us is a large tree. It's a very beautiful tree, right? It gives nice good shade, pretty thick leaves. Okay, this is actually an invasive species, category 1, Fisk invasive species. This is called carrotwood. A lot of you have this in your yards and you don't know it. So I want you to get to know it so then you can understand it's not a good thing to have. So this is a tree. This is the full size of it, but you're not always going to find it this way. You're going to see it this size. This is also carrotwood, okay? So this is one that looks like it's been cut. Somebody's been through trimming these trails. This is a bike trail we're on, and these are what the leaves look like. The one thing you're going to really stick out between these is at the end, you're going to see these two opposite leaves at the end. There's another plant that's also invasive that looks very similar that's called Brazilian pepper, which we're going to see later today. So here, these limbs going all the way over to the water are from the Brazilian pepper. And they're reaching out. They're reaching for sunlight because this side is shady and this is where all the sun is. It's able to go all these different angles and grow wide in order to get that sunlight to survive. It's a very strong, tough tree, and it's a very good survivor. And you can see also how thick it gets, right? So you may see a Brazilian pepper when it's small, and you may be able to get rid of it if you know it's there, but you probably won't know it's there. You probably just like some pretty tree that creates these pretty red berries. But eventually it's going to get that size, and you're not going to be able to get rid of it that easily. And you're going to have to pay a lot of money to remove that tree from your yard, okay? Now, here's the interesting about Brazilian pepper, okay? And a lot of really hardy invasives is they don't die very easily, okay? So we have an example here, right here. This is also a Brazilian pepper. Here's a Brazilian pepper that was cut, was trimmed along this pathway, and it's continuing to grow. So this is Brazilian pepper. Earlier, we talked about carrotwood. Okay? And this is a different leaf shape, right? So a lot of people confuse the Brazilian pepper with carrotwood, but carrotwood is going to have 2 of these leaves at the end of the leaflet, and this has 1. Okay? That's a very unique. And also you can see these leaves with the serrated edges on the ends. Okay? A lot of people confuse this with holly because holly also produces red berries. We're going to look to see if we can find some red berries later today. So as you can see, if you were to cut this Brazilian pepper down to the stump, all the way down, let's say you have it in your yard, you cut this with a chainsaw all the way down to the bottom, okay? It's not gonna die. It's gonna continue to grow. It's gonna produce sprouts like this. There's gonna be a lot of them, just like this one did, and it's gonna continue to grow and thicken out and become another tree again. It's very difficult to kill, okay? So there's methods for how we treat certain plants. This one would require uprooting the whole plant or chemical. Or you just get it when it was tiny. That's your easiest way. Just pull it when it's small. But you won't be able to pull it when it's small if you don't know what it looks like. You have to get to know these plants. Okay, let's see what we can find. So here, more carrotwood. This is what it looks like when a bird has been up in a tree and has been hanging out there and pooping out the carrotwood seeds. And now we have lots of carrotwoods. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all in this little area. And remember, these are going to become trees this wide. So imagine all those trees growing here. What else is going to survive here? Imagine how many seeds they're going to produce and how much those are going to spread. We're starting to see the equation here where it starts to multiply really quickly, okay, and cover a large area. And there's certain species that we've already learned that can do that. And those are the ones that we have listed and put on lists to prohibit from them being sold in nurseries, because they used to be able to buy a Brazilian pepper in a nursery. You used to be able to buy a Brazilian pepper at a nursery. Now it's a prohibited species. So that's something to keep in mind. We're learning so that we can educate the public on what not to have, and also stores what not to provide and sell to the public.
I heard a statistic the other day that invasive plants actually displace native plants at a greater rate here in Florida than development, and that just blew my mind. I mean, the amount of acreage. And as we walk around just this one little patch, I could see it.
Yeah.
I could see, you know, there's a carrot wood, there's a Brazilian pepper. I mean, you're seeing almost as many exotics as you are natives.
Yeah, especially in an area like this where there's not a lot of room for biodiversity. So when you have a shaded area, you're going to have a less biodiversity, if you can see, because plants like the sun. So if you have an area that has less trees and more open like field or grasses, those areas are going to have lots of different plants, high biodiversity. And those are areas we want to protect, but also those are also areas that people want to develop on, right, and build their houses on. That's a surprising fact. I didn't know that. I'm not surprised though, because think of Lake Okeechobee. Nobody lives in Lake Okeechobee, but there's invasives covering Lake Okeechobee, right? The Everglades. Not a lot of people live in the Everglades unless you work there, but there are a lot of invasive species. There are a lot of invasive species in the Everglades. So a lot of these natural areas, the invasive species can get in, and where people develop, there's really only certain areas people really develop that are habitable for people, and to make it easier for us to live there. So that does not surprise me. But that's a scary fact that you're saying. Yeah. All right, let's see what we can find. Okay, so we found another invasive species. This is a very popular one as well. Category 1, top of the list problem. And it's called umbrella tree. Okay, some of you might recognize this, some of you might not. I remember seeing the flowers in Hawaii, because it's a really bad problem there in Hawaii as well. So this is a very small one. This is actually really good at surviving in the branches of cabbage palms. I'll see if we find one that's growing in one, but usually when I find these, I find them up tall in a tree, because this also gets eaten by the birds and then dropped out through their feces and lands in these little crevices here, and it will start to grow just like a ficus does. Okay, this is very, very similar, but eventually its roots will come down. So this one didn't make it in there, so this one's just on the ground. But this is a difficult plant, because this one has a waxy leaf to it, a very strong, tough leaf to it. So treating this with herbicide is very difficult, okay? You can see that texture, that shininess. This is very difficult to herbicide treat. So this is something that would be hand pulled. And here we can see it's been cut before, probably to clear the trail, not to get rid of it. But this is the plant that would need to be hand pulled out. And they usually come out pretty easily. And this is also a smaller size. But as they get larger, right, you're gonna need a machete or a chainsaw to get it out. Yeah. But this is a very popular one. So this is called umbrella tree. So there's also a horticulture plant that is a smaller version of this that you can still purchase at the stores. It's not really invasive. I haven't seen it as a problem. This one is. This one I actually saw for sale recently. Someone told me they saw it for sale, and I saw the post, and that's not okay. This is a prohibited species. You cannot sell this. But we saw it at a store. So that means we have to communicate that, let the store know, hey, this species you're selling, we went and talked to them. That's something you can do. We went and talked to them, hey, but you can't do it unless you know what the plant is, right? If you see a Brazilian pepper at your Home Depot, right, you can go up and say, excuse me, sir, this is a prohibited species. Or let one of us know if you're too scared. Contact us and say, hey, I was at the Home Depot on Jog in Okeechobee, and I saw them selling this species, and I think it's prohibited. And you send me a photo, send us a photo, let us know. We want to know those things. You guys are the eyes. And then we will go out and communicate with that to them, because they can get fined for that, big money. So someone saw this for sale at a store in northern Palm Beach County, and they let us know, and we went and communicated with them, and then they took it off because they didn't know. Okay, here's a good one. Here's an orchid, right? We all love orchids. Who doesn't love orchids? Giving them away for Valentine's Day. My mom loves orchids. Okay, so here's an orchid. This one's a little bit confusing, whether it's native or invasive or exotic. So invasive is going to be a species that causes the harm. It's disturbing the native plants to survive. But what's the line of what's native? There are plants that have transferred over oceans or on boats a long time ago, before I was here, hundreds of years ago, they were transporting these plants on accident or on purpose, right? Maybe for food, or maybe it just got on the boat. A seed just fell on there, right? There was a bird on the boat and it pooped out the seeds, and now that's going from Africa over to Florida, right? North America. So our line of deciding whether something is native to Florida is going to be when we had European colonization here, okay? That's kind of our line we kind of draw. This one's one of those confusing ones, okay? We don't really treat it unless it really starts to cause an issue, starts to grow like that carrot would. It's also about resources, okay? So when it comes to how we trade our properties, you have so much money and so much time to treat an area, and there's hundreds of invasive species on them. Which ones are the worst? Get those first. And we're looking at some of the worst ones here today. Carrotwood, pepper, umbrella tree. So when you start to get to things like this, these are less of a priority. This is more of a priority. If I have a little bit of time to come by and treat something, I'm treating this, not worrying so much about this. So now we're gonna go over one of the methods to treat these invasives. And this is gonna be a cut and stump treatment. This is something you can do in your yard. And again, it's past the point where we cannot pull it out. So here we have the Brazilian pepper we talked about earlier. Here's the resprouting one that was cut to maintain this trail, keep it open so that mountain bikers can come through. They cut it. Well, it didn't kill it, right? It's resprouting. So, and this is also the same plant right here. This long one right here. Okay, so I'm not gonna be able to pull this out. It's too much. No, okay. So now I go to a different method, okay? So one method would be to foliar spray, to spray the leaves with an herbicide to try to kill that. Another method would be bring in a dozer, bring in something big and heavy to pull this thing out. This isn't really an appropriate area for that, right? We're trying to maintain this trail. There's native trees here where we cannot get through these pines, these cabbage palms. So this is more of a precise type of method we're gonna have to use here. Okay, so what I'm gonna use the cut stump treatment method. So I'm gonna cut and stump and treat this, okay? Okay, so now we're gonna cut through the stump of this plant in order to get in to put the herbicide in, okay? So I'm using my safety glasses. I'm using an herbicide. This herbicide is a triclopyr mix, okay? So the active chemical in this is triclopyr. You can buy that at Home Depot. Just look at the chemicals. It's gonna say maybe ivy treatment or hardwood treatment or stump treatment. And you're gonna use that, read the label, see what the percentage that you're allowed to use, because normally you have to dilute it. Some of them are already diluted. You really have to read specifics about it. This one is an oil-based mixture, so oil is gonna stick a lot better to these plants than a water base, right? It's gonna wash off a lot more difficult to wash off. So that's what I'm using here. This is a 18% triclopyr diluted with, it's called a plant oil, but it's an oil, basically, a cheaper oil. So you can also use like vegetable oil, but this is like a cheaper seed oil is what it's called. Okay, so I'm gonna cut the stump with my handsaw. There we go. So here you can see this has that light color to it. That is a live stem. So if we look at this, right, that looks has a darker color to it, right? That's not doing so well. This is nice and fresh and bright, okay? So when it comes to the biology of this, so it makes sense with chemically treating, the center of the tree, and this is a normal tree, this wouldn't be like palms, okay? The center of the tree is more of a structural purpose. The outer tree is gonna have the phloem and the xylem. That's gonna have the areas where the liquid and sugars flow through the plant. That's the lifeline of the tree. We're a little bit different than that. If you cut my skin, that's not gonna kill me. If you go into like cutting into my organs, right? That's the center part of me is the most important part of my body. This is different. The inside is the structural, the outside is the very sensitive areas. And all we need to do is put herbicide, this poison, on the outer part of it, and that's what's gonna kill it, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and cut the other one. There we go. Okay, so now we're gonna spray it with the triclopyr, 18% triclopyr mixture mixed with seed oil, and we're gonna spray it around the edges where the phloem and xylem are. And you don't need a lot. There. So the center doesn't need it. That's not what's flowing, all the sugars and all the water, right? So this is gonna now get absorbed into the root system, and that's gonna kill the plant. Okay, so here are some herbaceous species that we can also talk about. We've mostly talked about trees earlier. Now we're gonna talk about the small little guys. Now, these are usually the second problem after you've taken care of the trees. The trees are gonna totally change the soil, the moisture levels, the shade, the sun, right? Then once you've gotten rid of those invasive trees, now you gotta work on these little guys, which is where we spend a lot of our time at Palm Beach County treating a lot of these herbaceous plants. Okay, so here's a very common one that a lot of homeowners ask me about, and this is called balsam pear. Okay, so it has a very strong smell to it, produces a orange fruit with red seeds inside. A lot of you probably recognize that. Once it opens up, you see an orange downward pointing fruit, and then you see all these red seeds inside. That is called balsam pear, and that is this vine. An easy way to treat that is going to be go down and find the root of it and pull it. A lot of these vines, they'll start from like one stem and then they'll branch out. So like kind of think of it like this, right? The rooting system will be one piece, but all these limbs are all vine limbs going out different places. And so it looks like it's taking over. It looks like there's like 20 plants there, and it's really just one. If you find that one stem and pull it out, which is pretty easy, all that goes away, right? So balsam pear is a pretty easy one. The thing is, it sneaks up on people, and it's hidden in dense areas where people don't really want to go in and pull it out. Another method would be to treat it would be to spray it with a herbicide, right? This is not going to be something that would come with a bulldozer to treat. You can hand pull it, which is what we talked about. And chemical is probably the next best method. But as you can see here, if we go and try to spray with a foliar treatment, right? We talked about cut and stump treatment. Foliar is going to spray an area. So if I were to try to spray this balsam pear with an herbicide and spray it, it's going to spray everything in this area, okay? Good or bad. So that's the negative side of it. So if we want to really be specific about getting rid of the one plant and keeping the rest of them, then herbicide is kind of not the best tool to use. So balsam pear, there's another one here. There's a couple here actually. Here we go. We got Desmodium. Look at this. So a lot of people I work with do not recognize this plant, but when I start to take the seeds, look at the seeds here, that you might recognize, right? None of this you recognized until we get to that right there. Oh yeah, we all know what that is. Sticks to our shoes and socks and shirt. This is called Desmodium. Desmodium is a genus. There's several species, okay? But this one's an invasive species. Again, it's more on the lower end, very thick stem, okay? Very hard plant to kill because of that thick. So it's kind of like a mini tree, right? It's got thick stem to it, right? Similar to poison ivy, where we talk about the balsam pear, right? It's not as thick. That thing snaps so easily. Very soft and gentle, okay? So this is another species that you may have in your yard. I usually see it spread out, sparse within like lawn when you mow your grass. And then here's another one right next to it. Crow's foot grass, right? So we're kind of covering the plant here. But you can see how it kind of sprawls and is reaching out to spread all of its seeds. Yeah, so this is called crow's foot grass. You'll see it's a lot on normal lawns. A lot of people don't really know how to recognize grasses as if they're good or bad. I don't know what to tell you. I think I've been learning them. The larger grasses are easier to get to know. A lot of the time it's about if there's a strong white stem down the middle, it's probably a problem. But this is one where you want to take really good photos, use iNaturalist, which is what I use, and get some help from other professionals to help you ID your plants. Okay, ready? Yeah. All right, so here we're going to talk about the aquatic side of invasives. That's a whole nother section. The number of species are a lot less, but I wouldn't say they're less of an issue, okay? In South Florida, we have a lot of wetland areas. We have a lot of open water, ponds, canals. So these invasives get into those sites. And here's a really good example of how that happens. So here we're looking at two main species. You have water lettuce, which is this floater that's sitting up top. This water lettuce, I'm kind of going to show you, is actually just sitting on top of the water, okay? So that's its root system. How it reproduces is, if you can see this, it just creates a clone, creates a clone. That's how all these are getting created, okay? They're just reproducing themselves as clones, okay? So that's called a floater, but we also have grasses in here, okay? So we talked about one, the water lettuce, which is floating on top, and then you also have torpedo grass, okay? Another one of those grasses that's difficult to learn because they all look very similar. This one does really well in water. Look how it has these patches. Those, you can't really see how deep it is, right? But I can't walk out to that, okay? That is a floating mat of vegetation. So here, this would be a good herbicide treatment. So I'm gonna do that now. Let's see. So when we're treating with foliar herbicide, which is what you can do as well, and if you have a pond like this and you have this type of growth in here, so you can treat this yourself, okay? There's a lot of regulation, again, when it comes to chemicals. So I'm just gonna go over 2 simple ones to use to keep it simple for you guys. You only need to be using something simple like a glyphosate or a triclopyr. We use triclopyr with cut stump, and then we're using glyphosate for foliar. There are also alternatives, natural alternatives, we can call them natural, that will, like, let's say foliar, right? We talked about foliar treatment. You can also use a salt water or a vinegar to treat that. You look at those methods. I would say do that first. Like, that's your first bet. And then if you're having a hard time, try to bump in that herbicide use to it. But I definitely promote using that first, right? That's really gonna affect the chemistry and affect the ability for it to survive. And then if you need to use some herbicide, use it, but minimally, okay? Okay, so right now we just treated some of this foliar stuff. So now we're gonna treat the aquatic. One of the issues you have to understand is it is a chemical, right? It is gonna get sprayed. So the wind is an issue, right? There's regulation on how fast the wind can be moving. You don't want to be using this in windy conditions, okay? And I'm also using my protective gear, my nitrile gloves, and my glasses, boots, pants, and long sleeves, okay, to protect myself. So here we're gonna spray. I'm targeting 2 species, right? Torpedo grass and water lettuce. And as you can see, you start to be able to see that blue dye on the areas that I've treated. And once you start to see me treat a lot more, you can kind of see the line of where I've treated and where I haven't treated, right? You can kind of see that line of blue. That helps me understand that I'm not overspraying in an area. So eventually you would want to cover this whole area to get a full treatment. But then you also have submerged plants, which we haven't really talked about. And so let's talk about submerged. So there are plants that are in the water that we don't want. They're invasive, okay? Hydrilla is a big one, okay? So in order to treat those, we can go through the whole process again. Can we hand pull it? It's a slow process. You can only get so far in the water to hand pull. You're like snorkeling, trying to hand pull underwater. No, it's not realistic. Mechanical, is there a tool we can use to pull it out? Again, I don't know. I don't know anyone that does that mechanically. Can we use something large or scale? Okay, can we get like a dozer to scoop it out? Or scooping now earth out of the water and making it all, the soil get all dirty in the water? A bad idea. So that one gets a lot more difficult. And that one is one where we want to use that herbicide. Hydrilla is a problem because it grows so dense. Think of this coverage, right? It's very dense. You still have some open areas, but it's pretty dense, okay? This, but underwater, okay? All covering that large flow area. This clogs waterways where water has a hard time flowing, which we need that because we use water, right? If we want Lake Okeechobee water to come to us, we need it to be able to transport in that waterway. And also boats. Boats cannot travel in that thick vegetation. So it's very important to keep those waterways clear. A lot of times, a lot of herbicide treatments, a lot of just invasive treatments along waterways are to keep waterways clear. So I definitely think educating yourself is the best thing you can do for this whole cause. The best thing you can do for me to help me with my job, the best you can do for you in your yard or whatever it is that you want, whatever goals you have to help the environment or to have a controllable yard. I think educate yourself. There are resources out there. Contact me. Again, contact U.S. Extension Office at Mounts. Look up online yourself and start to get to know the plants around you. And as you start to get to know them, you'll start to realize, oh, this is a problem plant. Oh, this is a great plant. And then from there, you'll at least know that so that you can now go a direction to start figuring out what you want to do about promoting that plant or to getting rid of that plant.
Well, Antonio, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. I know I learned a bunch. I'm sure everybody watching learned a bunch. We now know some plants to look out for here in South Florida. We know what to do if we find them, and we know who to call if we don't know what to do. So I just wanted to thank you for taking your time and sharing your knowledge.
Good, thank you. I think this is great what you're doing and educating the public. There are definitely more species than we went over. There are hundreds of them, and that's my job to learn them and get to know them and prevent them from becoming a problem. So thank you for doing this and educating the public, and I hope you guys do help with this issue and get educated on it so that you can be a part of the solution.
There you go, guys. It's the little things we do in our daily lives every single day that make such a big difference in all of our tomorrows. Thank you for watching.